Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we create custom processes and tailor-made business systems so businesses can thrive and grow. So today's episode is one of those where it's a little bit different because I have Dr. Jeremy Wise, who is going to interview me in this episode. Hello, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited because this is one of the most important topics of all, which is how to get processes followed by all. Right? We could have the best documentation, the best process in the world, and it's all worthless if people are not following it, keeping it up to date. So this is really about how to get processes followed by all. And, I first want to kind of highlight a story. We were talking a little bit before we hit record about someone that it just didn't quite work out. And I love hearing because there's companies that are like, this is the best thing ever. And companies like, well, this just didn't work for me. So talk about a case where it just didn't work for someone, the processes.
I will definitely do that. But before I do that, I have to introduce you a little bit more so the listeners know who you are. So you are the co-founder of Rise25, which is a media company that does podcasts. And basically your whole mission is to get people successful by using podcasts, right? I mean, maybe
connect to their dream relationships and give to their dream relationships.
That's right. And you and John are the co-founders of Rise25. And this podcast is being produced by Rise25. And I want to give a big shout out to Owen from Sweet Process, because you and I met because Owen had me on his podcast, which you actually produce. And that's how we got to know each other. And then, I learned more about Rise25 and then became a client, which I am so thankful and grateful for. This is we're getting into the grateful, the gratitude season, right? So I'm definitely thankful for knowing about you and John and Rise25 and using you guys. You're the best. So just wanted to start with that. And also let our listeners know that you've done thousands of interviews. So they're in for a treat because you're a great interviewer.
Thank you. You do amazing work. I refer you to everyone that I know because everyone needs what you have and you're amazing at what you do. So
thank you, including your wife. So that says a lot. I mean,
a lot of
to
trust.
Your family.
Exactly. But I want to know why this doesn't work for some people.
Well, I'll give you the case study, right? A case story. So I started working with, I got referred to a CEO of a construction company. And they were very resistant to actually documenting processes and procedures. And I always do an interview at the beginning to see if we're a good fit or not, because not everybody is a good fit for this. Some people don't see the importance of doing processes. They don't want to put the work. It's not the right timing, whatever it is, or they can do it themselves. It's whatever it is for them. It's fine. So start talking to, his name is Steve. I started talking to Steve. And I asked him, basically, why the resistance? What's happening? Did you have a bad experience? Why do you think it's not going to work for you? And, then starting uncovering that, they made several attempts at creating processes and procedures, right? So they bought a manual that you can actually then tailor-made to your own business. They actually hired a consultant that came in and did some of the process work. And the consultant did a fantastic job. I was impressed. It was very, very detailed. And he didn't want to do it. He didn't even want to talk about processes. And when we start talking, the reason was because he goes, I spent so much money on it and it's just sitting on the shelf. There's nobody's using the processes. Nobody is doing anything with it. And so we uncovered the reasons why. And the main reason is because there was no it wasn't backed up by management, right? I mean, they engaged on this process, on this process of documenting processes, but then there was no follow through, and it wasn't implemented by all. There were also there was no buy-in from the team. So if you do not take the extra steps of actually making sure that it's being followed by all or implemented, there is no point in documenting your processes, because nobody's going to use it, and you're going to waste your resources, and you're going to waste time and money and attention on something that is not being used. It is all in the implementation. So maybe you're going to spend 80% of your time documenting, because that takes time, but you have to spend the rest. You have to make sure, because that's where the 80% of the result are going to come from that 20% of time that you're going to implement the processes and procedures. So that's why I wanted to record this episode, to talk about how to make sure that those processes are being followed by all.
And we'll talk about the flip side, which is someone who is really successful with it. But really, that's what it's about, Adi. It's how to avoid it sitting on the shelf, how to avoid resistance from staff or help with that. And there's a lot of things that we're going to walk through in this, but talk about the opposite case.
Sure.
Someone actually worked for.
Okay, let's do that. So first of all, the sitting on the shelf thing is one of my clients called it the electronic dust. It doesn't accumulate. You want to make sure that, because we do it all electronic, so it doesn't just sits there and accumulate the electronic dust. So that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to make sure that it's being implemented. So on the flip side, I'll give you a great success story, one of many. This is a client of mine, and she has several offices now. She started with one, and she is in the professional services arena. And we started with her. It was chaos. It was just chaos, confusion, and we had to put order in. So we figured out, and the listeners can listen to our other episodes that we did together in terms of like how to get started. We started with one process, right? One area that we had to put process in, and that was the client onboarding. So we started documenting that particular area, and there was some sense of order that came in, right? So she was able to pull out of that area and look a little bit more, and look a little bit more how she can expand the business and start working on the business. And then we did the next area and the next area and the next area. So we did sales, we did hiring, we did personnel management, we did her accounting area, we did business development, and actually how she actually does the operations. We work with the operations, and we documented the operations area. And, we finished the project, and we did a whole rollout of how to make sure that those processes are being followed by all. We got staff to buy in. We made sure that the leadership totally bought into it, and they're actually using it. We start using it in order to solve problems and issues internally in the organization. And we implemented a periodic review. So it's the procedures are current. And she's also using those procedures in order to train and onboard new personnel, which we also created the process on how to do that. So we had it all covered. And, we finished the project, including the coaching after that. And then I contacted her. It was about 2 years later. And I said, so I called her up, and I said, Sue, how's it going? And she says, wow, it's amazing. I'm actually able to work on my business. And I said, tell me about it. I want to hear how you did that. And she said, well, I listened to what you told me. I said, great. I say a lot of things. So I wanted to know, what is it that I actually said that was so impactful? And she said, you told me about, it has to start with me, meaning with the owner, right? With a state of mind and with the commitment and decision that we are going to actually use systems in the business. And that really carried me through, she said, to not go back to how I was reacting before. But when I have an issue, when something happens, I actually refer to our process documentation system, and we pull out the process or the procedure, whatever we have there on how to do the thing. And we follow what you taught us in terms of how to resolve issues using processes and procedures. So we are not lazy in terms of like, oh, well, if somebody comes to me with a problem, we just try to talk about it to solve it. Let's really use the tools that we have. And the second thing that she said is that they start measuring the productivity of people in relations to the processes and procedures that are set for them. So those two things together really made a difference. And I am so proud of her. She opened a few more offices and she has this amazing expansion plans. But not only that, she's actually was able to delegate and actually get herself from working in the business to working on the business, which that's what she always wanted.
It sounded like she wanted that freedom and she was able to get that freedom and be able to work on the business.
That's right. Jeremy, I think I mentioned it before, but we actually did a survey of business owners and we interviewed many small to medium-sized business owners. And the first question that we ask is, what do you like most about being a business owner? And the number one word that came up is freedom. Mm. That's what people like about being a business owner. I mean, that's what I like about being a business owner. I'm sure it's true for you as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that you like it. And then you realize if you don't have the processes, you don't have the freedom.
Right. Exactly. So what frustrates, and when we did a survey, we also asked what frustrates you the most. And it is basically the employees, the confusion, the chaos, and not being able to, I want freedom, but I really don't have it, if they don't have the systems in place. So that's for sure.
So we're going to walk through the 5 steps, because really when we talk about the first example, the second, there was several key differences. 1 was mindset. We're going to talk about the mindset. 2 is talking about the rollout process. 3 is accessibility. 4 is resolving issues. And 5 is regular reviews, how to do that. And you have a checklist for that. So let's start with mindset.
Yeah. So let's start with mindset. So in the example that I gave, it's so important. The first thing is the decision. It has to start with the top, with the leadership team, with the owner, with all the stakeholders, deciding that they're going to use those processes and procedures in order to manage, lead, and run the company. So you have it, you use it, meaning from now on, we train all the employees using the processes. If there is an issue that comes up, we go back to those processes and we use it. We keep them up to date. If we schedule a meeting to review processes, this is a meeting like with our most important client. We don't just put it to the side and then don't do it, right? And we set a good example of following a process. We don't, and I've seen it so many times where, there is a process on how to do something, but the owner goes, well, you know what? No, this time we're not going to do it this way. We're going to do it a different way. And I'm not saying, that we can't innovate. I mean, I'm all about innovation. I'm all about reviewing processes. I'm all about keeping them current. But if there is no really good reason of why not to do it, other than just decided that it's not convenient to follow a process at this point, it doesn't work, because that it gives the message.
It's mixed signals.
It's mixed signals. Exactly. That's exactly right.
This happened to me last week. There was something in our business and we were chatting with the person who's, doing it. I was training them on it and I did it a little different way than the process. And he's like, well, which way do you want me to do it? And I was like, I had to make a decision to be like, well, it could be done either. I just be like, well, you know what? Let's just keep it the way it is. Don't listen to what I actually just said or reverse the order, because then I'm just sending mixed signals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, there has to be freedom within the processes. I don't like to write. I mean, that's one of the problems that people have with having processes. They go, okay, it's too restrictive, especially if you're in a creative field. You feel like, oh, it's too restrictive, it's going to restrict me. But the truth is that if you don't have it, then it restricts you, because then you spend so much time doing other things other than the things that you like or you need to do. So we document the processes, but then we also leave the freedom of action, because that's where our creativity comes in. And this is what differentiates us from others, because we have our own superpowers and we definitely want to shine in that area. But when we have a process that is set up, let's use it. And that's why we don't go into too much details, too much minutia, too much going into the weeds. It's unnecessary, because then you start changing one and then you say, you didn't do 1, 2, 3, as you said. Well, that's where we leave the freedom. And that's the beauty of documenting the processes correctly. So assuming you documented them correctly and you have what you need, let's just now follow them. And that is the mindset. It's the decision that we're going to follow. It's the decision that no matter what, we're going to resort to the written process, that we're going to look at it, we're going to apply it, and we're going to do it. So that's the first step, which is mindset.
Yeah. And so we have mindset. Part of that is being enforced by the leadership. And the next stage is the rollout process, or anything else on mindset.
Actually, let's talk about accessibility even before that, because I think it's the right order. So
got it. Yes.
In accessibility, I wanted to put it there because it's something you're already going to start when you're doing the process documentation. So maybe that's even before you have to have the mindset, but you also have to make those processes and procedures accessible. That's why what do I mean by accessible? Meaning that everyone in your team needs to be able to reach and use those procedures and know where they are. That's why I like to use process documentation platforms. I use Sweet Process, Whale, Task Train, Trainual. Those are wonderful platforms that not only makes it easy to document, but it also makes it accessible to the team members, because they all will have a login. It's in the cloud, so they all have login. It has version control. It has the ability to sign off on documents as people read it. It's easy to assign documents or processes to people so they can actually read it. So by doing that, you're making it accessible. So it's not like, where is that document? I have that a lot when I come into when I start working with a new company and they said, oh yeah, we have those processes documented. I asked them, okay, show it. Well, let's see, which folder is it in? Well, it's in Google Drive. No, it's on OneDrive. No, let me call my assistant so she can find out where it is. Oh, well, we don't, it's one of those. I'm sure we're all familiar with that syndrome.
Like, yeah, Dee, it's very accessible. Wait, actually, I got to make a couple phone calls. So
yeah, where is it? And we can't find it. Somebody purged all of our files. We don't have it anymore, etc. We all know that. I've been guilty of that. I experienced that. It's, that's why for my own company, I also use a platform because of that particular reason of I had it in folders, but then I couldn't find it. I just, that document disappeared, or I thought I wrote it, but I didn't, and it wasn't in the right place. It's not accessible. We don't know how to file them, etc. So that's why using a process documentation software makes a huge difference. And that's why I'm spending the time talking about it, because it has to be accessible. And also accessibility is also making it so they're fun to read, they're easy to find. So when we use such a platform, they have great search capabilities. You can tag, you can organize them in such a way that it's easy to find. But again, as I said, you can search by words, by keywords, or by words in the document itself. And it's also, you can use visuals, you can use videos, you can use screenshots, and it's very easy to use. And one of the, actually, I think a couple of days ago, I was showing the system to a prospective client, and he said, wow, what I like about it, that it's actually bite-sized paragraphs or bite-sized pieces, because it's not this overwhelming 6-page Word document that now you have to start reading, because most of those softwares are built in such a way that each step you can actually add like a paragraph or a picture or a screenshot or a video, etc. So it's very easy to digest it. It's very easy to actually read the first one and then go to the next one and the next one, and it's not this overwhelming mass of words, and that's basically people have a hard time reading.
Yeah.
So that's why accessibility is so important. So I think those two subjects, the mindset and the accessibility, go hand in hand in the documentation. But I wanted to set it up before we go into the rollout, which I think is the next step we're going to talk about.
Yeah. And so we have mindset, we have accessibility. And for people who don't realize or understand, that's why this is also where a Dee and her team plug in, because, she is an easy button. You push the easy button. You want the processes done. You call her, and she actually interviews your staff, does all this for you. So it's nice and clean. It's in wherever, whatever software she chooses for its accessibility, and helps you through all of these processes. But that is like a little piece that's a big piece, but it's insert a D here, and that all gets created for you and helps you with those pieces. Right. So the next part after mindset accessibility is then they get created, right, magically by a D, if you want to put the burden on your team, but then it's the rollout process.
That's right. That is the rollout. So the rollout is super important. I can't emphasize enough how important it is that we do it correctly and we roll it out. And, and I wrote several blog posts on it as well on my website. You can go and read it, and I will put it in the, I'll give it to you, Jeremy, so we can put it in the notes for the podcast. But the rollout, let me walk you through how we're actually going to do the rollout. So the first
process review checklist.
This is the process review. Yeah. And then I'm also going to talk, I think number 4 was issue, like what we talked about is like how to use it in day-to-day management and solving issues. But this is just the rollout at the beginning. Like you finish the process documentation project, you have it all there. Now we need to roll it to the team. So the way that
we'll link it up, by the way, Adi, but if people want to check it out and they're listening, it's bizsuccesscg.com/process-review-checklist. Just so you have
that's
it.
for the process review, but we also have one for like what I'm going to talk about in terms of the so you can go to, you're right, it's bizsuccesscg.com/articles, or you can just go to the top and it says articles, and there you can then search implementation and you will find it, or basically processes followed by all, you will see there. So the first thing that we do is we write the processes. Now, when we write the processes, there are different methods that we do it. As you said, we sometimes write it completely from beginning to end, or we also collaborate and we basically have the team write some, we write some, etc. Right? So the first thing that we do in a rollout is make sure that we have the rest of the team read the processes that some of the team wrote. So for example, we are working with a property management company. So we have some of the property managers that got selected to write the processes. I mean, each one of them did several processes. So let's say one of them, a team did listing, a team did maintenance, and a team did resident relations, right? So each one wrote their segments. Now what we're doing is we're taking the other property managers and read the rest of the procedures that they didn't write and make comments. So that way we can have a full viewpoint. Everybody participates and everybody gives their input and their viewpoint. So that is basically the input part of it. So that's part of the rollout, because we already have them written, but now we want to make sure that the entire team is, yes, this is the way we are doing it, or if they have anything that they want to add. So we get that team to understand that, right? So that's part of it. Then from there, we're going to roll it out to anybody in the company that actually uses those procedures and need to know about it. So in this case, for instance, this is written by the property management, but you have, let's say you have an on-site property manager, right? That didn't participate in writing those procedures, but there are procedures that affected them. Or the maintenance supervisor, there are procedures that affected them. So then we roll it out to them. We give them a login to the system. We explain to them how to use the system. I sometimes like to record a video, and just so they can see how the system works. I mean, in the project, when I say a system, it's the process documentation platform. And have them and assign it to them so they actually read it with the due date that they need to read it. What I like to do is I also create a survey, which basically asks them questions about what they just learned. It's not a test, because some platform, if the client wants, we do a test or an assessment or an assignment, and they can do that as well. But I like to give a survey at the end, basically asking them how they like the platform, how do they think, how can they use those processes? Is there anything missing? I even ask them, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this particular particular system to a coworker if there is a problem, right? I want to see the engagement. I want to see how they liked it. So we do the survey, and then we learn from it, and we make any adjustments accordingly. And we do the same thing for the entire organization. So there will be some systems, some processes that everybody will be aware of, such as the HR or the who we are, or the company, any processes that have to be generally with about the company. And then we start rolling out the specific positions so they are all aware. Because I know it sounds very trivial and very simple, but they need to know what's written there in order for actually to implement it and use it in the day-to-day operations. So we started with the decision of using it. Then we talked about making it accessible, but now the main thing is to make it known to everyone. So everyone really has to read it. And sometimes, if it's technical, if we're explaining how to use a certain software, let's say, for instance, I'm working right now with a painting company, and we are integrating a new app. So we documented how to use that app. And now we want all the painters and the supervisors to actually go through the procedures and do it, actually apply it and use their iPad in order to whatever they need to do in this app to make sure that it actually works and the steps are actually correct and they correlate. So that way they can actually on the job see how they can apply the procedures. So the knowledge of the procedures is super important. You won't be able to implement and use it if people don't know what's actually written there, because they're never going to get there, because it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's a great book, but I never read it. I mean, I'm never going to use the data in the book.
Yeah, it needs to be something that they know. And also you're getting buy-in, because someone if you hand it to someone, it sounds like, well, here it is. And they're thinking, well, that's not right. I do this every day and I know how to do this. You didn't ever ask me. And so if you don't get their buy-in, they may be offended, I imagine, if they're like, well, no, I know how to do this and you never even asked me on the actual process, and it's missing a bunch of stuff. And so you give them a chance to voice what is missing and to contribute to the process, it sounds like.
100%. 100%. Yes.
So we have mindset, accessibility. Is there anything else that we should mention in the rollout process that's important?
I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't have to be very complicated, but it has to have due dates. It has to have accountability. You read it by this time and this time. And, and sometimes, because people are busy, and sometimes what it will take is to actually in a group meeting to do that. I've done it now. I've done it several times, but in the last few weeks, I've done it twice. A roofing company. So we all got together on Zoom, and they all got set up on their computers, and I walked them through the process, and I actually had them read the processes step by step so they can actually and give feedback right there. And they go, oh yeah, no, that's good. That's not, this is missing, this is that. So we actually did that in a room. And then I did it with another client who owns a concrete company. And we did it the same thing. We did it via Zoom. So first of all, I was with them on the Zoom call. And then the owner actually got then followed up the following day in person to continue. And they all set up in their conference room, and they continued reading the entirety of the procedures that we actually wrote. So all of them actually read it. And we actually had also assignments there. They did the assignments. So it just was a way to actually make sure it happens. So there are ways, you just have to make sure that it doesn't go away, going back to our mindset. If you ask the staff to do it, or if you assign it to them, they have to be held accountable with a specific time to complete it. And if it doesn't happen, then be creative on how to make it happen.
Yeah, I feel it's, for us at least, it's the most important time spent and meetings spent, because it saves so much time and energy after the fact, doing it right the first time. Everyone's on the same page. So I can't stress that enough for ourselves. And then so we have the next one is use process to resolve issues, and then regular reviews. So let's start with use process to resolve issues. Good. People versus process.
That's right. So part of the commitment of using processes and procedures, part of the mindset and the commitment is that you actually use it on a day-to-day operations, right? So it's not something that we just use for onboarding and training, although this is very important and it has to be used. And actually, we should do another episode because I can talk for at least an hour on how do we use onboarding, how we use the processes and procedures to onboard a new employee. Because we did an episode talking about how you create the onboarding processes, but I really want to go over how we get, like, what does the first 90 days look like with using processes and procedures. So we'll do an episode on that. But so I'm not going to talk about it here, but I'm going to talk about how we actually use it in order to resolve issues. So a company should have some kind of a system, and if not, we need to create it, of how they process issues, how they do their management meetings, how do they bring about, how do they solve problems when they arise, how do they make changes, etc. Right? So whenever you're doing one of those, you should use the processes that you created. Meaning, so here is an example: is you take we have a process that we created. Let's say sales. Okay, so how to do an estimate. Okay, so or how to respond to a lead, and then how to schedule an estimate. All right, so let's say there was a problem. There was an issue that came up where sales are down, right? I mean, we are in a sales meeting and sales are down. Okay, well, instead of trying to figure out what is happening, how we do it, just like solving it. Somebody had an idea and then you start discussing it, and let's open our processes here and let's see, okay, what is the problem that happened? All right, so, and the estimates are not being scheduled for the estimator. Okay, well, let's open up our processes and procedures. What is our process of scheduling a lead that comes in? And we actually look at it because there is a step-by-step, and we go, okay, step 1 done, yeah. Step 2 is done, yes. Step 3, okay, we actually did not do step 3 correctly, because it says right here that what we do is we offer them the different options and try to schedule them right there, but the receptionist now is not doing it, so people are not scheduling, as an example. It's actually a true story. I mean, I was working with a client of mine. They are naturopathic doctors, and we realized that, the appointments are not happening. There was something changed, and really what changed was that the receptionist changed the process on how it goes and the script and walking the new patient through the process. So nobody's scheduled, or very few, so basically the appointment book became empty. So one thing can be, well, let's, whatever you're doing, discipline the receptionist, or try to figure it out, or waste time trying to investigate, as opposed to just open your process and see what step was missed, right? So if you discipline yourself to actually do it with every single issue or problem or something you want to implement new, you make sure that you also refer to the process. That's going to save you a lot of time. And it's really a question like this. Okay, so there is a problem. You ask yourself, is it a people problem or a process problem? It can be both. Hopefully you know how to hire, and you hired good people, and you have good people on the team, and everybody's in the right seat. So I'm not going to address that. I mean, it's a different issue, right? But let's say you decided, okay, yeah, I have the right people. It is a process problem. So again, you can also check if it's both, right? So let's say you check in process right now. The next question to ask is, identify the issue, and then is there a process for it, or is there not a process for it? So let's say there is not a process for it. Okay, good. So now we need to create a process, right? Because we identified that it's a lack of process. So let's create it. Let's, again, roll it, make it accessible, roll it out to everyone, make sure that they read it, and enforce the use of it. So that's the point on the tree, on the decision tree, if there is no process. Let's say there is a process. Okay, so now we have to ask, was the process used or not used, right? So let's say the process was not used. Why? So that becomes a people problem. Or it might be part of a problem, might be a process problem, that because it's incorrect, people just ignore it and just don't use it. Or somebody basically bypassed it one time, gave them mixed signals, and now they don't want to use it. So now you have to investigate, okay, process exists, but it was not used, why it was not used, right? So it can be, from there, we have to figure out what we need to do to make sure that it's being used from now on. Let's say the process does exist, and it was used, but there was still an error. So then we have to review the process to see what is it that it's either was not applied, misapplied, or there is something wrong in the process that led us to the wrong decisions. So that's where we need to go in and also fix that. So you see how you have that decision tree, but if you actually use it for every issue that comes up, people are going to get used to going to the platform and check, hey, do we have a procedure for it? We don't. We need one. We do. How come it wasn't used? What do we need to do in order to use it? I have with a company that I was working with that are a big manufacturing company. And what we did is we started with the documentation of the sales processes for them. They had nothing documented. I mean, it's a big, international manufacturer, and they basically manufacture and they ship it internationally. And they didn't have any processes, and it was chaotic, right? So I came in and we started writing the processes. And one of the things that we did was we did a sales process. We identified the sales, we wrote them down, we documented it, and then we started doing, I started doing coaching calls in terms of, I was in their meetings for about 8 weeks after that, where each issue that came up in terms of installation, manufacturing, warranty, all of those things that we actually had specific procedures for, when they brought it to the table and it came up as an issue, is ask that question, is it a people problem or a process problem? And we start going down that road, and I really taught them how to use that approach. So then 3 years later, I contacted them, and I just, I send my newsletter every week with great articles, and they responded to one of them and said, hey, Adi, we haven't talked. Great article, totally applies to what we're doing. Just want to let you know we're continuing with this process of basically analyzing if it's people process or if it's a people problem or a process problem. And we just expanded, we created a new market, and the stress of what we had in our sales, marketing, installation, and distribution is just gone because we are just following processes. So that's an example for how to use that approach and how to actually, but what it takes making it a habit, right? I mean, Jeremy, you would agree that in order for something to work, it has to be a habit. It has to be something that people are used to. They don't have to think about it. That's the way, it's part of the culture. It's ingrained in what you do. Yeah. And that's how we actually make sure that it's being followed by all.
It also takes blame off of people, because it's like, listen, it could be our fault, the company's fault that you made the mistake. It's not your fault. It's like our process is not correct. So it takes blame off of, like, placing blame on someone and onto a third party process that you can take accountability as a company for, right?
Correct.
So
it's part of the culture in terms of it's a very good point. So instead of blame, instead of pointing fingers, it's more a collaborative. Okay, let's see what happened here. Yeah. And it's kind of like, so everybody dives into solving a problem. And honestly, what I've seen is that if you have those staff that are not into that collaborative or finding out, owning, taking responsibility, accountability, they just leave. They just basically say, this is not for me. And they might blame it, now it's so strict and we have processes and we have that. But you know what? It's just that they were not following it, right? And now it's all in the open, because before you have that transparency, then it's easy to hide and it's easy to just do your own thing, and you can't really figure out what was done. But now that there is transparency, accountability, invitation for collaboration, it's really hard to hide. And if you don't produce, if you don't follow protocols, if you don't do exactly what's needed, and if you don't pitch in to innovate and to do more, you just don't have a place in that group.
Yep. So I know you have another call coming up, but I want to hit on regular reviews.
Let's talk about regular reviews. And that is the one that I have, that article that you mentioned. So regular reviews are extremely important, because the last thing that you want is to have to go for those processes and procedures to be obsolete, because then they're not being used. Oh yeah, we wrote that procedure a year ago. That's the way we used to do, but we don't do it anymore. And that is something to recognize, that those processes and procedures are a living, breathing document. They change, and the more established the company, the more the process is more mature, they are going to change less, but there is still things that can be tweaked. So the core processes are not going to, like your core policies should not. But if you, let's say, for instance, found a better way, you're using a new software, you found a better way to do that, or you added a tab, or you did this, it has to be reflected in the process, because it's just like the mixed messages that we talked at the beginning. If there is one thing wrong with the process, then somebody will say, oh, yeah, this is wrong. I wonder if the other steps are obsolete as well. I'm not going to follow it, right? So it really depends on the maturity of the processes and where your company is. Then how that determines how often you want to review those processes, whether it's going to be every 3 months, every 6 months, once a year. The process documentation platforms I mentioned, they have an automatic way of actually reviewing. And there is a whole process on how to review it. And I have actually a 10-step process. And again, I'm going to put that article there so our listeners can actually follow through on that in terms of how do you actually go through the review process, which is very important.
Yep. Yeah. And it's, it goes back to the accessibility. If everything's accessible and people are using it, then they're going to be constantly in it and be forced to update it anyways. So it kind of is embedded in the steps that we've talked about. But yeah, if there's something that needs to be reviewed. So just to sum it up for a second, really, how do you get processes followed by all? I'm going to have to listen back to this because there's so many nuggets here, but think about mindset enforced by leadership, accessibility of a process documentation platform, the rollout process itself, and then how to use process to resolve issues, people versus process, and then having a regular review of those processes. So Adi, as always, thank you for sharing your knowledge.
You are very welcome. And thank you for interviewing me.
Where should people learn more? Where should they go to check out more?
They should go to bizsuccesscg.com. That's my website, and then contact, or you can email me directly, adi@bizsuccesscg.com. And our phone number is 503-662-2911. So you can call, you can also text that number. So it's 503-662-2911. Shoot me a text, I'll answer back. Any questions that you have, please contact me.
And check out more episodes of the podcast. Where can people check that out?
The System Simplified podcast. So chances are, if you're listening to us, you knew how to find us. So subscribe to the System Simplified podcast, and you will get an episode either twice a week, and all about systematizing a business.
Get your freedom today, right?
That's right.
Thanks, Adi.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.